with similar and differing points of view on the topic. Mr. Bryan will run as an independent, whereas Mr. Piercy will throw his hat under the CDP, formerly the UDP. Now, we want you to reach me via email at news@cayman27.ky. Stay with us. We'll begin the discussion on the panel after this. Welcome back. You're watching the panel, and we're talking about work worries. With me, as I introduced earlier, Kenneth Bryan and Jonathan Piercy. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening, Tommy.
All
Good
right.
evening, Tommy.
So we know where the unemployment rate stands right now, 6.2% amongst Caymanians. But I know that you're hearing the same stories that I'm hearing. While that figure might be lower than it's been in quite some time, people are still concerned. Mr. Bryan, I'll give you the floor first. What are you hearing? Are things getting better for people?
Well, I think for any unemployed person, they feel that it's still not good enough. And personally, for me, I think that 6.2% is 6.2% too much. We shouldn't have an unemployment problem here in the Cayman Islands because we have more work available than we have Caymanians. So obviously something isn't working well, and it hasn't been working well for quite some time. Whether or not we got a grasp on it, the changes that are necessary are not things that can be done quickly. So I'll give that to this government in respect to not being able to get a hold of it. But they're definitely not putting a priority on many of the things that socially are causing much of the unemployment. Say, for instance, lack of education. We know that that is a major factor. Retraining, trade schools, as well as a major one is discrimination in the Cayman Islands. It's real, and Caymanians are feeling it every day, but it doesn't seem to be a top priority right now, and that's the sad part.
Mr. Piercy.
Tommy, good evening, and thanks for having me on the program. Always a pleasure. I think that we have quite a number of things affecting that number. First of all, I don't think it's 6.2. I actually think it's higher. But if you understand how unemployment statistics work, you have to be actively looking at a job during the period that the survey is actually taking place. If you speak to a lot of Caymanians, they've actually stopped looking for work. They're so fed up, so disgruntled that they haven't been looking for work. Some people haven't looked for work in over a year. So
what are they doing then to survive?
Well, what they're doing is they're either underemployed, which is a new statistic, by the way, that I'm sure you've just noticed that they've now included that, underemployed.
That started around 2014 or 2015.
Right, so they're unemployed.
The underemployment rate.
Correct, so they're either underemployed or they're doing temporary contract work, which again, if you're doing temporary contract work, you're no longer considered unemployed. Yeah. So I think that the number is very close to what it was before, which is right around 8-9%. Question has to be asked, why? Because we do know, and just recently the Minister, Honorable Archer, Marco, he stated that the economy the GDP is actually rising at almost 2%. Okay, if you look at the GDP, if that is growing at almost 2%, but if you look at the work permit numbers that are almost growing at the same amount, then what you're saying to me is that the demand in labor is now being met by the supply in foreign labor. So GDP is on the increase. The economy is starting to, as they say, turn a corner, but the Caymanians aren't experiencing, they're not feeling. And I'll tell you something else. You can always statistics is a weird thing because you can get anything you want really out of statistics. But what we have to pay attention to is what the ordinary person on the ground is seeing and what they're feeling. And those things aren't quantifiable all the time. So if people are losing their homes, that's a factor. If people are having difficulty paying their utilities, that's a factor. As my good friend here kind of said, if people are having a problem finding jobs, that's a factor. If discrimination is for real, as he stated, and I agree with him, that's a factor. So when you look at those factors, how much disposable income someone has, how many kids are going to school hungry, how much money persons are saving, how much people are qualifying, Caymanians are qualifying for homes, those are factors that we really need to look at, and then we will really get a picture.
Before you add on something
as
there,
to what's happening.
Mr. Bryan, to touch on the underemployment rate, I just want to point out that underemployment in Cayman, or according to the ESO, is classified as those who are working part-time. Underemployment, in my opinion, should probably also encapsulate those who are working in a position that is beneath their skill level, or
it's no longer called gainful employment. Yeah. Underemployment is below your ability. Go ahead, sir.
Well, one other factor that hasn't been considered here, which I'm very concerned about, is the migration of Caymanians. We have no figures to show how many Caymanians have left their own home because of lack of opportunities for themselves in their own land. I hear it every day on Facebook and social media where people are abroad. A lot of them are going to the UK because the social system is a lot better and care for the people. We have a problem where people are leaving here to go somewhere else just to eat and have an opportunity, and that's terrible. And this is why I always say that the leader of this administration is socially disconnected, emotionally as well, because he doesn't understand what the average person is going through. He doesn't understand what it feels like to be hungry or to have to pay.
I have to put it to you then. Somebody might say that you might have an axe to grind. You used to be his political assistant. You're no longer a member of the Progressives. You're on your own now. Is that the case? Because somebody might be listening to you right now and say, well, you know, he will say that because he has an axe to grind.
No, well, I think most people see it. It's not. This is not a news story about, unfortunately, about our current premier. He doesn't seem to be emotionally connected. It's a character about a leader. Whether you like McKeever or not, most people say he's a passionate person. He cares about the average person. That trait is not carried by this current leader. And that trait is a very important one in a time when people are suffering and are having the most difficulties, and practically I think in our history, to survive by way of opportunity and by way to provide for themselves and their family. It's an important trait, and he doesn't carry it.
Well, one might say that has nothing to do with someone's trait rather than the ability of the administration to deal with a situation at hand. But we do have to take a break right now. Stay with us. The conversation has only just started. And so the conversation was going on as we were in the break. You know, this is a very heated topic, employment. Yeah. And we are 1 year out from the elections, and, you know, emotions are running high, and people are looking to see who their next leaders are going to be and want to hear exactly what they think about these very important situations at hand. So, Mr. Piercy, I know you wanted to add on to what Mr. Bryan was saying earlier about
I was just
the government and its leader being disconnected.
I was just saying that you know, I can't altogether say that it's a problem with him. I think that if you look at the party across the board, I would say that quite a number of them don't have the necessary skill sets. One of the things you have to understand as a representative, as a leader, is that while you're a leader, you're also a servant. You're a servant leader, and there's certain characteristics that you need to display. And one of those things is empathy. Another thing is obviously understanding, taking the time out of your way to listen to people, to interact. Those are some of the things that you need, not just as a premier, but as a leader, as a politician. We're dealing with, you know, Cayman's politics, Caribbean politics. Isn't like North American politics or even politics in Europe and the UK, where you have the premier and a whole cadre of assistants and different things. You know, we have to roll up our shirt sleeves, whether or not you're a Minister of Finance or you're a councillor in the education department. You have to be connected. You have to roll up your shirt sleeves and you have to get to work. And you know, it seems as though they understand that during campaign mode, but it seems like after that they kind of burrow away. And that's not the sort of leadership that I'm hoping our constituents.
We're still a small
in
jurisdiction, Tammy. So you need to have that one-on-one connection. Particularly now we're going to single-member constituency, you have to be very close to your people. That means you can't stay in an office all the time. But I really don't want this to be about Alden himself. The issues that we want to address tonight, let's move away from him and talk about issues, because the people want the answers about that. So.
Exactly.
Yes.
So we get back to the people. What are the people saying? In your opinion, you say you're on the ground, you say you're knocking on the doors, you say you're listening to them. What are they saying to you? Well,
they don't feel that the moves that this administration has done so far in respect to trying to make sure that Caymanians have the right opportunities are being effective. The NWDA is not being effective. The attitude that people don't want to go there is still strong today. People come to... my office is not even open yet, which I intend to have my grand opening in about 3 weeks. But people are coming, my door isn't even open yet, still trying to find job opportunities. And I say, well, okay, you know, have you gone through the right agencies to try to assist yourself? Yeah, I say, yeah, I can't, still don't get no answers. We're still having that repetition. Now, one may say, oh, okay, they're using that as an excuse, but you can tell that by the different characters. And I have legitimate people who have gone away to university and come back home and said, Kenneth, I can't get the opportunity. So our system to get people employed is not working. And I think a large part of that is the discrimination element. Caymanians are being discriminated against in the Cayman Islands. hands down. And it's because of the control factors that many employers have over work permit holders that you cannot have over a Caymanian. You can't tell a Caymanian, listen, I'm going to work here overtime and don't pay you, because a Caymanian not going to stand up for that. You can't treat a Caymanian in a disrespectful way, because they're not going to stand up for that. It's an attractive thing for employers who are malicious in some ways to have non-Caymanians worked, and they can pay them less as well. So we have to address that by policy.
Let me bring Mr. Piercy in. So you're hearing what Mr. Bryan is saying about the situation, but it's almost like we're in a catch-22 situation, because we all know very well that these work permits government is reliant on for the revenue. It's part of that feeds the economy. So how do you get away from this situation?
Well, it's fascinating that you raise that, because you're absolutely right. It is what we call a revenue earner for government. But let me point out two revenue burners for government. Government spends over $10 million on the prison every year. That's a burner. Government also spends over $10 million on scholarships every year. So combined, that's $20 million. So ask yourself for a second, if you think that the revenue generated from immigration justifies the social woes that we're paying for. Not that education is a social woe, but certainly Northwood Prison is a social woe, and that doesn't take into account the courts, the police, lawyers, right? All that stuff. I mean, the police, the budget for the police is almost, what, $30-odd million, right? So it's the largest part of the budget. So when you look at those two elements, even if immigration is bringing in $60 to $70 million a year, we still in a position of losing. We're in a losing position. It gets to a point of diminished returns, right? So yes, I hear that, but we can no longer use that. Listen, let me ask you something. Let me ask you, and I'm going to ask the people out there as well. How much is your future and the future of your kids worth? How much? Is it worth $1 million? Is it worth $2 million? Is it worth $50 million? If you've given birth to a child and you love your child and you want the best for your child, are you prepared to, in exchange for that child's future, to give away $50 million or $60 million in terms of job opportunities, in terms of education, in terms of saving, dealing with social problems? How much is it worth? If you tell me that it is priceless, then I am simply saying that come next year, let's treat the issues like they are priceless. Let's not take envelopes from people. Let's not be forgiving because someone comes and pays some groceries. And let's just be real, right? Let's just be real. Because we're having some issues. You talk about employment. Look at what's going on right now with the small businesses, with the vendors.
And that's going to be another topic we talk about tonight.
I want people to recognize and realize who's putting that yoke around their necks.
All right, we're going to have to put a yoke around this neck right now because we do have to go to a quick break. See us in just 2 minutes. We'll be right back. The time is just flying. I didn't even realize we were back. We're busy talking here.
Amongst good company.
Yeah.
Mr. Bryan and Mr. Piercy are here with us talking about employment, and you brought up the vendor situation.
Well, before we go to the vendors, I think you highlighted a very important point, which is our dependency on work permits and the conflict that has with finding solutions for Caymanians who want employment. I think that obviously governments make projections based on revenues they will earn from work permits, and then they make issuances for what they're going to do with that money. And
part of budgeting.
Part of budgeting. But what I'm saying is, I think that the conflict that is there highlights the fact that we need more revenue earners. We're going to get into the point a little later on in the show about the fact that we have all our eggs in one basket, which I heard you highlight before. We need to find more industries. We currently have 2 industries that are under threat right now. Financial services, I think everybody knows about what's happening with that and how severe things could be if those who want to destroy our industry are successful with it. As well as we have a bit of a minor threat with Cuba next door, which is a very attractive destination, and we have to keep our eyes on that. So our 2 main pillars are under threat. We need to find other sources of revenue. If these 2 stay strong, that's good. But we need to have extra revenue so it doesn't conflict with the employment opportunities. So we say, okay, if we're not going to make the 15 or 20 million on the work permits, that's fine because we have revenue elsewhere. We just have to make sure the Caymanians get the work first. So let's say, I'll give you an example. I'm sorry to be in so long, but if you had a company shut down that employed 75 Caymanians, you can't say, okay, I'm going to cut back on the projections for 75 work permits so Caymanians can fill those jobs, because you're depending on that money to come in. That's the problem. That's a conflict of dependence on work permits, and we are not addressing it. And the only way to address it is create new industries in Cayman, and that has to be a must.
We're going to talk more about the diversification of the economy, but I did want to get to the vendor situation.
But let me just jump in quickly on this point, because I hear what Kenneth is saying, but I want people to understand that this immigration issue isn't going to change overnight. So what I'm saying is that you're not going to work from, say, 40 to 50 million or even 60 million in immigration revenue, and then next year when we sort out the employment situation for Caymanians, that revenue goes to zero. It won't happen. Remember, right, that we only really have right around 1,500, 2,000 unemployed Caymanians, right? And if you look at industry sectors, you will see that financial services, for example, they provide a lot more in terms of revenue for immigration. Where you find the lack of work are in other things, like in construction for Caymanians and other non-skill specific type jobs that you're finding. And if you look at the immigration fees for that, you know, they don't bring in as much revenue as the other stuff. So I think that I actually do think that we can fix this problem without having to really worry about loss of revenue. It's
probably
just
about 5%.
Listen, it's political will.
Yes.
The first thing that has to happen, and I know you want to move on, but I have to address this because this is an important component. When you have people going to the NWDA or to the needs assessment unit, and their number one complaint is they can't find jobs, so therefore they can't find money, therefore they can't support their family. We have to take the time to discuss this, and we need to let people understand this is what's happening.
Okay.
It is a very complicated situation. It has all these various tentacles.
Listen, it's not as complicated. It is. Listen,
no, in terms of the offshoots. I mean, as we've been talking, one thing weaves into the other.
Absolutely.
It's a domino effect.
Absolutely, they're all interwoven. But I just want to highlight for people out there to understand that this problem isn't a problem that is unsolvable and unresolvable. What it needs is priorities and political will. Listen, we will upset the apple cart. If immigration departments start to put quotas on the numbers of persons coming in, okay, on certain work permits for certain categories of work permits for a certain period of time, that is going to upset the apple cart. That is why I talk about political will. Because at the end of the day, I am not afraid to upset that political cart if the reality is that it's going to be for the benefit, the long-term benefit of my people. I would like to see a situation where every Caymanian that is willing, able, and available to work gets an opportunity to work.
All right, we're going to have to continue this when we come back, because now I have questions following what you just said. Time again. Here we go. Stay with us. All right, we're going to get back to the vendor situation because that was brought up earlier. I want to deal with that and then we move on. So we know we have vendors on 7 Mile Beach, also in the West Bay area, who want to sell their goods, but they're having trouble doing so because they need to be licensed properly. And they're not getting the proper licenses, the trade and business license, because you need to have the pension and the health and all this kind of thing. And people saying, look, we just want to sell and make money to feed our family.
Tammy, I must say,
but there are rules.
I understand the balance that is need to be kept, and everybody has to have a fair opportunity at success in doing business. So I don't expect me as a business person to be paying nothing, or don't have to pay pension insurance or business license fee while Jonathan has to do that. I understand that element. But this is not necessarily the cause here as far as I understand. Some of those individuals may be in violation of pensions. They have to get those sorted out. You cannot violate the law. Secondly, if they were up to par with those regulations or those requirements, why are they still not being given the opportunity? And as far as I understand, the reasons why they're not allowed to do that is because you can't get a business license on Crown land. Now, and the public beach is that. So they may have a business license, but they just can't operate there. So it's going to take cabinet to change that rule. That's another political will thing again. These people are demonstrating that they're trying their hardest to survive and make money. Maybe we don't like the way it's presented because we have a top-tier tourism destination that we have to protect that brand. Just put in proper regulations that they don't do it in particular ways. We have Bontown, for example. They created stalls there. Why can't they do it on West Bay Road?
Mr. Piercy, we're looking at video right now of West Bay Public Dock, and those vendors there were served with a public notice, and they did not have the proper licensing because they didn't have the pension insurance, and you saw the notice that they received. You have experience with this. You used to work at the head of DCI.
He didn't just work, I was the director over the DCI.
The head of DCI.
And I can assure you that this matter, I have to tell you, is a bit convoluted. Not complicated, but convoluted. Let me share some stuff. First of all, Kenneth was right on both counts. There is a situation where some individuals cannot get no individual can get a license on Crown land unless Cabinet approves. But there are some individuals that are really not operating at all with a trade and business license at all.
Yeah.
So we have to sort that out. First of all, let me just be absolutely clear. Unless the law, through the provisions of exemption for certain types of businesses like farmers and fishermen and artisans and stuff, who are exempted from getting a trade and business license, everyone in the Cayman Islands must and should have, and it should be a requirement to have a trade and business license. Okay. The trade and business license for many of these individuals, there's this general consensus, I think, or belief that these individuals cannot afford the trade and business licenses. Well, what we should do is we should look at making it a nominal fee of something like $75, right? Which is a little over $6 a month. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again, without trying to sound elitist in any way, but if you can't afford $6 a month, then you really shouldn't be in business, okay? So if we can agree to that, then let's move along. The next thing is this. If it's Crown land, government can either have these people form a co-op and then get into a lease arrangement, a peppercorn lease arrangement with the co-op to be able to give them permission to stay on that particular area to do their business. That's one element. The other element is this. When DART, for example, was looking to do the development on the beach and whatnot, part of the plan was to have kiosks there, okay, that would have been available to some of these vendors.
Exactly.
That has never happened. Kenneth is also right with respect to the Bordentown Beach. If you were to take a drive down there on any given day of the week, you will see that those kiosks are closed. They're rusted down. And that is nothing more than the PPM administration saying, you know what, this was a UDP idea, and we're not going any further with it. But what people need to understand is that was the people's money that was spent.
Exactly.
Okay, that wasn't the UDP money, that wasn't fundraising, that was the government's money. And some of those vendors that are there on the public beach and whatnot, if those kiosks, if those stalls in Bordentown were working, and if the bus co-op and those other co-ops around that are around the whole tourism thing were made aware, they could make their stops along the way and have people come out there, buy food, buy craft, buy arts, and it'd be perfectly legal. So these are the things that just need to happen.
Sometimes I'm left speechless because I think there's so many things at play here. You know,
it's
there's a whole
complex.
Go East initiative thing that really hasn't happened that well. We have a transportation issue that, oh my goodness, if we could just get that fixed once and for all, and then we can deal with some of the issues we're talking about here as well.
But Tammy, one thing I want to highlight, and Jonathan, I think you may agree with me in this. The difficulties that business people are facing are primarily amongst the small business owners, the ones who are just starting up or halfway there.
Yeah.
Now, whatever changes that the minister in charge of DCI has done has made it more difficult for them. You asked me about how the talk is on the road about employment, and small businesses are suffering. The hurdles that they have to jump over every single day is making it hard for them to survive. And what you're going to have is the big man, so to speak, taking over all the money pie, and that's not good, because if you don't have a middle class, you're going to have some problems.
All right, a break is going to take over right now, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the panel. We're talking about employment woes, and we want you to reach out to us. News at Cayman27.ky. Mr. Bryan, you were just talking about the plight of small businesses and what you're hearing on the ground.
Well, as I was saying before, the small businesses are crying because they're saying it's become more difficult. Now, and this administration have highlighted some initiatives they think was good and effective, like say, for instance, duty breaks and new business owners don't have to pay a license at all. But some people would actually prefer paying $1,000 for a license than the number of hurdles they've put in the way, because those hurdles can't be jumped, period. So it's being painted as if, oh, it's so much better now. I'll give you a break on the first license. But the things that you need to do to get that first license in the first place, you can never get them done. It's so hard for a Caymanian to start as an entrepreneur to get into business. And those who have survived this wave from the recession back in 2008 up until now, we're getting better, are crying more now than they did, say, 3 years ago.
Mr. Piercy.
Listen, I can tell you that there has been a tectonic shift, let me use that word, a significant shift in the focus that DCI has placed. They have moved away from supporting small businesses through counselor services, through assisting with business plans, through workshops and seminars and different things. That shift, there has been a total shift away from that to fee collection and regulation. Kenneth is absolutely right, and I can tell you, I have spoken to a number of business persons as well who have complained time and time again and said, look, you know, I don't have a problem paying $300, $400, $500 for a business license. My problem is the cost of immigration work permit fees, right? If there was a differentiation factor, meaning if it was a SME, a small or medium-sized enterprise, and they were bringing in a professional that would normally, the work permit for someone that has, say, 60 employees is $3,500, but this guy comes along, it's only him and 3 other guys, right? Why couldn't we give him a break, right? Say $2,000 for that same work permit, right? So people don't have a problem paying the trade and business license. As a matter of fact, if you spoke to most of the licensed and regulated businesses on Ireland, their concern has always been pension, health insurance, immigration fees, okay? So if we can put an element of differentiation in there, okay, where we're distinguishing between the small and micro-sized business versus the medium-sized and larger businesses, that would help. If we would move away from regulation and fees, okay, not to say that's not important, but it shouldn't be the focus, to supporting small businesses, allowing them to gain access to microfinancing, for example.
That's a major thing.
By going through the DCI, getting the business plan done and approved, and then moving on to
What about the role of the Small Development Bank?
You mean the non-existence of one?
the CIDB.
The CIDB, yes. the Cayman Development Bank, sorry.
But when I was there as director, I worked very closely with Tracy over at the CIDB, because that was absolutely what we were trying to establish. We were trying to establish a process whereby my department, DCI, would look, assist, approve, in principle, the business plans, okay, go through the various asset tests and all of that. And then we would then refer them over to CIDB, who, because they got our stamp of approval, they would then issue the microfinancing. What has always been a problem, and Tracy will tell you this, is that there is a problem finding the finances to do this sort of stuff.
At the end of the day, it comes down to directives, and we talk about that.
Directives, priorities.
And making sure
that,
where
those directives come from the cabinet.
Entities charged with administering the support get what they need in order to facilitate that support. We have to facilitate a break right now. We will be right back. Welcome back. You're watching the panel, and we have a comment and a question. First of all, the person who's writing says that they like the idea of letting vendors on the beach join the co-op and see if we can get those individuals properly licensed and operating in a safe and professional manner. And we have a question for Mr. Bryan, because you've officially declared.
Yes.
And they're asking, what other industries would you try to create? Because we're talking about diversifying the economy. We touched on that before. I want to delve into that a little bit more. But they were asking, what other industries would you try to create?
Well, if I can highlight,
given the opportunity to get into office.
If I can highlight one as an example today, is I had the privilege when working with Rooster, having a very honorable man, Dr. Thomason, on the radio show. And I was given the opportunity, by way of information, about the fact that he offered this government a way of ideas in medical research and the possible revenues that could be made from it by creating an authority here in the Cayman Islands to allow medical research to be done in the Cayman Islands. Medical research is $1 billion industry in the United States. And just so people can get an understanding of what was suggested by Dr. Thomason to this administration, which only gave him about half an hour to explain, and nobody can understand the complexity of that within a half an hour, but that's what the cabinet offered him as a person, right? Just like how many, many decades ago, we started a new authority to create a financial industry, it'll be exactly the same thing. You're creating an authority here in the Cayman Islands, and you're duplicating what other individuals are doing elsewhere, but just doing it better. If you have $1 billion industry in the United States, and you just get a mere 3% of that, we can cover our whole budget. And this is the thing that we need to start doing, creating and inviting persons to offer new industries to be created in the Cayman Islands. So we no longer have to depend only on the two major pillars we have right now, which is tourism and finance.
So, you know, I talked about putting the eggs in these very familiar baskets that we've been doing all this time. Mr. Piercy, you just heard Mr. Bryan talking about what industry he might want to bring on board should he have the opportunity to be in office. You have a finance background as well. You've been watching very closely what's been happening in terms of the pressure we've been getting from the mother country, particularly as it pertains to beneficial ownership. Are you concerned about what's happening with the financial services sector, and do you think that we need to diversify that?
I laugh because unless anyone has been living under a rock for the last couple of months, they'll know that I am dead set against it, and I'm very concerned about. I actually shared 5 minutes of your
dead
time
set
here.
Against
beneficial ownership on a centralized platform because of precisely that, because of the risk of it causing irreparable damage to our industry. Persons need to understand that this is not just going to affect offshore international financial business. This is going to affect everyone. Everyone's information can go and will go on a centralized platform. Tommy, your information will go on a centralized platform. Kenneth's information will go on a centralized platform. My information will go on a centralized platform. Imagine if my son, for example, was away at university and someone found out that Jonathan Piercy has a certain amount of assets or has a certain amount of worth, and they kidnap my son. They hold my son ransom in Miami or New York or Tampa or wherever he is because they got my information, because my information was hacked in, the platform was hacked in. I hear the government talking about $1 million to beef up cybersecurity. Are you serious? So, listen, that's laughable. Listen, the Pentagon, the United States Pentagon was hacked. Okay. Recently, Fidelity, it was in the press. There was a cyber attack. Listen. We're joking.
So just so everybody knows where we are in this stage of the game where beneficial ownership and the public registry is concerned, government has agreed to enter into discussions with everybody else to see what everybody's going to do. So we haven't signed to anything yet. But in terms of our financial services industry being so tied to this situation and the need to diversify that for the sake of what we're talking about tonight, employment.
Yeah. Well, listen, let me say this. First of all, they didn't sign the latest agreement. They have already agreed to certain things. Remember when I was here a few weeks ago, we spoke about the agreement, the exchange of notes, and I showed you the whole. So that has been agreed to.
So, but in terms of diversification now, do you think
in terms of diversification, no, absolutely. We have to diversify the economy. I don't think, though, that when we do that, that we must then all of a sudden sort of leave alone and not pay attention to financial services. Because let me tell you something. There are more and more and more and more millionaires and billionaires being created every day, okay? And we are known around the world, okay, not as a tax haven, but as an international financial center by those persons who need us and use us, and they understand the significant role that we play. So we need to defend that. We need to lobby that and keep that. But we need to diversify the economy. Let me give you an example, because I agree with Kenneth's example wholeheartedly. Research medical industry is great. But there's all sorts of opportunities in renewable energy, okay? Green technology, okay? Give you an example. China, as you may know, is the #1 producer of solar panels, okay? But the majority of persons that consume that don't live really in that area. They're in Europe and this part of the world, this Western Hemisphere. Don't you think that there's a possibility where we could enter into a significant arrangement with a manufacturer of solar panels in China to have a just-in-time warehouse facility set up here for partial assembly and taking care of warranties, okay, parts on the warranty here in the Cayman Islands, Do you know how much jobs that would create? Do you know how the significant cost reduction in solar panels that would be? Do you know how many companies would be interested in speaking with some like a jurisdiction like the Cayman Islands? I can tell you that because when I was director over DCI, I went to China, and I can tell you those are things. I don't want to get too far into it because unfortunately, we also have a tendency of poaching good ideas and not giving people credit for it. So I'll say this, that is not so far off the horizon.
Well, we've gotten two ideas here in terms of diversification of the economy, so hopefully somebody's listening. We're going to take a quick break and be right back.
I hope the politicians are listening.
All right, welcome back. We are talking about employment and what goes hand in hand with employment, education. Something that's very near and dear to my heart, and I know that there are some serious concerns that our children are not getting everything that they need to enter into the workforce, being prepared properly for the fields that need Caymanians in those positions. Yeah. Now, gentlemen, do you think that we are doing enough in our education system, particularly as it pertains to technical and vocational training? Because government says it is doing, you know, they have these programs that there's...
What programs?
Where they work with the private sector and whatnot, but you know, I look
at the programs where they have to beg the government to help fund it. You mean the automotive where they have to beg them to say, listen, can you please help us fund so we can keep open?
Or the hospitality school that they can't even get apprenticeships. One of the kids that graduated from the school, unfortunately, stole some money from the condos, and the condo has now decided altogether we're not taking anyone else from this. Come on.
So what solutions do you proffer, Mr. Bryan?
Well, personally, I think that they have to create a government one. We're not talking, when I say a trade school, I don't want people to think that, oh, government's going to build another building. A building doesn't create a system, but there are other individuals out there who've started these initiatives to have trade technology being taught, but they're not being supported. And the trade school, Mr. Moore, that started, is a prime example. I know you must have heard this 5,000 times, but yet still, he's not being funded. And you're talking about almost 4 years now. And I'm telling you, 6 months in, I personally took the premier to the school so he knows about it. He saw it. Did he fund it? Did he help it? No. And this is a prime example of priority setting. If you don't give those persons who are not inclined for an office type job an opportunity to survive, what do you think they're going to do, Tammy? They're going to be the same ones that goes into the banker's house and take their money because they have to eat. And if we don't deal with the social problems that we're having to give Caymanians an opportunity, the people who are not doing their job to give them the opportunity, they're going to be the ones that rob, because poor people don't rob poor people.
I think accountability lies with all of us in that front, to be honest. We all have some role to play in making sure that we cultivate a society that we all want to live in.
Absolutely, and how do we do that? The first thing we do is we treat people fair and give them every opportunity to succeed. Yeah. Kenneth, there's absolutely nothing that I could add to what Kenneth is saying. I could expand a little bit, but I agree with every single point. I mean, there's a direct correlation between the rising crime statistics and the numbers of children, okay, that are graduating out of school without any form of decent academic qualification. Listen, approximately 65% of our students every single year, okay, are not equipped to do basic English and math, and they don't have a skill or a vocation. That's a fact, okay? If you don't start to address those issues by introducing a technical and vocational school, a proper technical and vocational school, this not a knee-jerk reaction to the issue, then we can start to see an improvement in that. But Tommy, here's the problem. Here's the problem. When you say we all have a role to play, we all do have a role to play. Here's the role that I play. The role that I would play is I can sit here tonight and tell you that if I'm given a chance, I will make sure that there is a technical and vocational school put in place within the first 2 years of my administration.
Well, so I have to say this, though, because
you know, there was a part of the manifesto for progressives, right?
So this year, so exactly what Mr. Bryan just said, you don't necessarily have to have a building, but there is a program that they've started rolling out this year. Whether we'll see the fruits of the labor.
The 1.7 million?
No, not the $1.7 million program. Where technical vocational training is involved, reaching out to other private sectors.
When was the elections? The elections were in May of 2013.
I'm just saying, I would be remiss of me to not mention it because we had government here talking about it. So I need to mention it, but we haven't seen or reap the rewards from that.
Yeah, and I want to be fair here. Because it's a complex issue in respect to education, sometimes you will not see the fruits of your labor for a long time. So for all I know, the Minister of Education can be working magic at this particular point. It's very hard to bring her down in that respect. But what we're seeing right now is not effective. One part that I'm going to hold her accountable to right now is the safety element in the schools. Children are going to school in fear. How can you learn if you're afraid of your environment? If you can't at least keep a hold of the safety element, what's the rest of it is all going to go downhill.
Mr. Bryan, that's a whole other show, I can guarantee you.
I don't even want to blame. I don't really want to blame any minister, because to be honest with you, this didn't happen on their watch. What I'm saying is that there has been a systematic abandonment of our people. That's what I'm saying.
The music is playing. I so want to talk more about this. We're going to have to take a quick break. Stay with us. I can promise you these two gentlemen are going to come back because we're nowhere near finished this discussion. We only have a minute left, 20 seconds each. Mr. Bryan.
Tammy, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, and thanks to the listening audience for giving me an opportunity to be in front of you. Tammy, there's going to be a lot to be discussed in the next year. The bottom line is Caymanians have to be the top priority, and I know that's been said before, but this government said they were going to do it, and they just didn't. You have to vote for people who have that character skill that will put you first.
Mr. Piercy.
Tom, I want to thank you also for giving me the opportunity. We have a lot of challenges, but we also have a lot of opportunities to make the lives of Caymanians better. And I just want people to pay attention over the next year, and come next year, you know, vote with your head.
All right. Well, I know we're going to be hearing from these two gentlemen in the run-up to the elections next year. We're a year away. That's still a lot of time. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.
Great show. Thank
my
you.
pleasure.
And to all of you who tuned in, thank you. We will be back. Stay with us, or rather, we'll see you next week. Good night.